Now, you might remember just a few moments ago, we had L.A. Marzulli on the program talking about his theories of Fatima, what happened there, that miracle. His theories are that it is some kind of extraterrestrial event. The sun coming down, the Virgin Mary might have been an E.T., and now we're going to have a different perspective, of course, the Catholic version in a moment. My special guest, Father Sean Connolly, will join us. Now, for those of you who just need a little upbringing here of what had happened, in the spring and summer of 1916, a 9-year-old, Lucia Santos, and her cousins were herding sheep near their home village of the parish of Fatima in Portugal. They later said they were visited 3 times by an apparition of an angel. They said the angel, who identified himself as the Angel of Peace, taught them prayers, to make sacrifices. Then, beginning in the spring of 1917, the children reported apparitions of an angel again, and then in May of 1917, 100 years ago, apparitions of the Virgin Mary, who the children described as the lady more brilliant than the sun, started appearing. In a moment, we will talk with Father Sean Connolly about Our Lady of Fatima on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Father Sean Connolly is a priest of the Archdiocese of New York. He attended Fordham Preparatory School in the Bronx and then the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts, where he received a Bachelor of Arts in the Classics, and immediately following college, Father Connolly entered St. Joseph's Seminary in where he received a Bachelor of Sacred Theology from the University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome, a Master of Divinity and a Master of Arts from the Dunwoody. Father Connolly was ordained to the priesthood back in 2015 and serves in parishes in the Archdiocese of New York. He has written articles on Fatima, one called The Miracle of the Sun, and he heard our program when we had L.A. Marzulli on talking about how he believed Fatima was an extraterrestrial event. And the father says, hey, you know what? I have my own views on this. I'd like you to give me some time, and so we have. Father, welcome to the program.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Norrie. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your program. It's a really new experience for me. I'm not used to being up at this hour.
Well,
first time on the radio.
Well, good for you. You sound great. Yeah. And by the way, my mother was born in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, not far from where you went to school in Worcester.
I know Fitchburg well. I used to actually attend Sunday Mass there while I was a student at Holy Cross.
Oh, my gosh. I wonder if they know you.
They had the Latin Mass in Fitchburg, which I kind of enjoyed getting to know in those early college years, and I'm happy to offer that form of the Mass also as a priest. So I do know Fitchburg.
What years were you out there?
I was there from 2006 to 2010. So I'm a young priest. I'm only 29 years old.
Oh, you are a young priest.
Priesthood.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's right.
Remember the big rock going into Fitchburg? That huge boulder?
I don't remember that. No.
More up the town when you go up the hill, there's this huge boulder. I used to stand by it when I was a kid. I thought it was as big as the planet in those days.
When I go back to visit friends up there, I'll have to have them.
You got to look for the boulder. That's right. Absolutely. So I want to get your reaction, first of all, to what you heard when L.A. Marzulli was on with his theories. He's been a great guest of Coast to Coast, and he believes that Fatima occurred. There was something happened, but that it might have been an extraterrestrial event. And I just want to get your take on that.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I wish I was able to hear that program and to hear L.A. Marzulli myself. But just to clarify, it was actually one of my readers who listened to the program, and he facilitated my being on with you, wanting to get the clear Catholic perspective. So I do appreciate that, and it's a testament to your listeners, how invested they are in all that you talk about and your search for the truth. So I appreciate your impartiality in permitting me to have the opportunity to give the Catholic perspective on this great event, especially because this is a very special year for us as Catholics. It's the centenary year.
That's right.
The 100th anniversary of these apparitions in Fatima.
Truly remarkable.
And, it is remarkable, and we've had some really special celebrations in commemoration of Our Lady's appearances on the 13th day of the month from May to October 100 years ago this very year.
I was raised a Catholic, and I got to tell you, my mother called me after the program, And, she is a staunch spiritual and religious person and did not want to hear the extraterrestrial theory at all.
Right.
But I said, Mom, it's a different perspective. And she said, I understand that, but you need to get a priest on.
Right.
So there you are.
Always listen to Mom. Never fails.
So
Marzulli's a gentleman. He's a man of conscience.
Absolutely.
And from what I heard, he presented things, in conscience, in a honest search for the truth.
Oh, and he's a believer in the Virgin Mary. He did not at any point not say that he didn't believe that at all. He just believes Fatima was a different kind of an event. The way I described Fatima, is it pretty accurate in terms of what happened in 19...
that was a very nice, brief description. Absolutely. And we can go into the details a little bit.
Sure.
And then over the course of our conversation, address some of Mr. Marzulli's points. But maybe as a foundation for our discussion, if I could just give an important distinction for how Catholics view supernatural occurrences.
Sure, okay.
Such as apparitions at Fatima. I think it's very important if we're going to have, an honest assessment of the Catholic perspective. So there's a distinction that needs to be made between what is public and what is private revelation. So public revelation is the deposit of the faith. It's everything which is binding upon all Catholics to believe on matters of faith and morals. That is, what pertains to the salvation of our souls. And all of that in public, official revelation was revealed through sacred scripture, that is the Bible, and the dogmatic teachings of the Church. So all Catholics are bound to believe what is contained in that public revelation, the deposit of the faith, the Bible, and the dogmatic teachings of the Church. Then there is the category of private revelation, which is what Marian apparitions would fall under. And if, like, apparitions or supernatural occurrences such as these are deemed genuine by church authority, by the magisterium, it's treated as a private revelation which is supposed to emphasize some facet of that official public revelation that's binding on all Catholics for a specific purpose. But it's never to add anything new to the deposit of the faith. And it's given to us by heaven for specific purposes, such as, to validate and draw attention to the message given to us by heaven and our particular context for the particular needs of our time, in order for Christians to better recall and emphasize some aspect of that overall Christian message, which is definitive.
Can we rule out that the children made up the story?
I think we can rule that out definitively. I think it's a tougher case to prove that it was a concocted hoax than it is to be authentic.
Okay.
I think it's a much tougher case to prove. And one of the main points of that testifies to the veracity of the Fatima event is the character of the children themselves. When Our Lady came to tiny, unknown Fatima, she came to the simple, the childlike. And this has, biblical principles. King David was chosen by God despite being the youngest in his family. The shepherds at Bethlehem were the first who received the announcement that the newborn king, the Savior of the world, was born, even though they'd occupied a very low place in Jewish society. God does come to the humble, to the childlike, and Our Lady, giving a much-needed message for our times, came to 3 simple children to the tiny, unknown Fatima. They were only 10, 9, and 7 years old, and they had nothing to gain by this story. They only had everything to lose. In 1910, a mere 7 years before Our Lady came to Fatima, the Catholic monarchy in Portugal was overthrown. An anti-clerical, secularist government took power.
Mm-hmm.
Many churches were outlawed. The Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon was humiliated and exiled from the country. Priests were forbidden to wear their cassock or their habits in public. Civil laws on marriage were changed to the secular standards of the time. And they were under threat of imprisonment and death at such a young age.
So these children to come forward when they did, even though it was 7 years later, that's pretty gutsy, isn't it?
Immensely. And consider their age. Consider how easy it is to intimidate or to coerce a young person into just admitting, yes, I'm telling a fib. But these children never buckled under any pressure.
Were they believed originally by the church?
Well, the church, and this is something that also has to get through, the church is never quick to approve a private revelation. The church is always the most skeptical.
Okay.
And she has a formal investigation. So the local parish priest, who L.A. Marzulli uses, his interrogations, is naturally the most skeptical person. It's his obligation, it's his duty not to lead the faithful astray.
Yes.
He has to always have the first instance in saying, look, everything we need to know to go to heaven we have in the Bible and in the teachings of the church. This is extra. Let us proceed with caution to see if this is really from heaven. Now, the faithful masters are more quick to believe, but it's always the duty of the authority of the church to be naturally skeptical and more reticent, and to have a formal investigation to prove the veracity of the events.
Father, why do you think the angel came down originally, even before, apparently, the Virgin Mary?
Yeah, it's a lesser-known element of the Fatima story.
It doesn't come up much.
It's very important. It doesn't. So technically, the supernatural occurrences began 1 year prior, in 1916, as you mentioned. We don't know the exact dates of when the Angel of Peace, who also identified himself as the guardian angel of Portugal, came to Fatima, but we know it was 3 times that year, in the spring, the summer, and the fall. And he taught the children, very strong prayers, prayers that, necessitated them to do acts of penance and making sacrifices for God for the conversion of sinners. So there is a real maturity to these children to give that message and to live this lifestyle of devoted prayer, fasting, giving up their food to poor children so they could go without and offer that little pain in their bellies to God in reparation for sinners, and also the acts of charity to the poor children in the village. This is not common from a 10, 9, and a 7-year-old. And I think the purpose of that, the 3 apparitions of the angel, it was preparatory. It was to prepare them for what was to come. Our Lady was going to entrust them with a message for the whole world, and it was given to simple, humble children, and they needed to prepare for it by means of prayer and penance, and that's what the angel told them to do, and they did it faithfully until Our Lady came in May of the next year.
I've always heard that there were 3 secrets that were given to the children. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. It came, Our Lady appeared to them on the 13th of the month, from May to October, except in the month of August. Our Lady came on August 19th because the children were arrested by the local Freemasonic administrator who wanted to clamp down on this spread of religious devotion.
Okay.
And he threatened the children's lives one by one, that they would be boiled in a vat of oil.
Jeez.
And their parents would be arrested if they didn't just admit that this was all a hoax. And again, which really testifies to the veracity of the events, and this is documented, they held firm to their story. And they spoke of heaven in the face of death. That's
compelling.
That's not natural for a 10 and 9 and 7-year-old.
No, that's pretty compelling.
But in the July 13th apparition, that was the major one. It's probably the most significant of Our Lady's appearances at Fatima, other than the miracle of the sun, which occurred on October 13th.
And we'll get into that in a second. So she tells them these. Does she tell them these secrets all at one time?
She does. She gives them the secrets all at one time. It's technically one secret that is divided into 3 parts. The common parlance is to refer to it as the 3 secrets of Fatima. That's because one of the secrets was revealed much later than the first 2. The first 2 were finally revealed by one of the visionaries who lived, because the two younger ones, Francisco and Jacinta, died a mere 2 years after the apparitions. But Lucia, who became a religious sister, cloistered in a Carmelite convent, lived, so I think the age of 97, only dying in the year 2005. And she released these memoirs in the 1940s, and in 1941 she revealed two parts of the secret given to the children at Fatima. And it was a prophetic secret, which were guarded, zealously by the children. And the first two parts of that secret refer especially to a frightening vision of hell. Our Lady showed them a frightening vision of hell, and she said, "You have seen hell, the place where the souls of poor sinners go. We must pray and do sacrifice for the conversion of sinners." The children
scared the living daylights out of them, didn't it?
It did. They were different after that July 13th apparition. They had a real serious character to them, and they were known to increase their prayer and to increase their penance.
They saw demons and everything, I think, didn't they?
They did. And they saw souls burning like embers. A terrifying vision. So often we're afraid to speak about the teaching of hell or the reality of its existence. Especially sometimes in the church, priests are very shy to teach this to the youth, But Our Lady did not hesitate to teach this and to give a vision to 3 small children. And I think it's needed for our times because we really need to restore a sense of the fear of God and also a sense of sin. We live in a society where we don't want to call anything a sin anymore. We want to be so open-minded. And it's good to be open-minded and to be always charitable, of course, and accepting of individual persons, but not to principles, which can be erroneous or which can lead people astray.
All right, so the first secret was a vision of hell.
That's right. It was a vision of hell. The children increased their prayer and penance as a result of what they saw. And then the second secret, Our Lady called for a devotion to her Immaculate Heart. And if there was an increase of prayer, an increase of penance, and devotion to to her Immaculate Heart, then great trials can be avoided. And she foretold the coming of another world war, which would be worse than the first one.
Because the first one was just about ending right around then, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. This occurred in 1917. The First World War ended in, I think, November 11th, 1918.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it left Western Christian civilization in ruins.
But she talked about a World War II, basically.
She did, to 3 children in 1917. She said if man does not return to God, does not increase his prayer, does not have devotion to my Immaculate Heart, then a worse war will come. And she also foretold the damage that the nation of Russia would do to humanity by abandoning Christianity and embracing communist totalitarianism. Now, she mentioned Russia, and that Russia would spread errors throughout the world. The Bolshevik Revolution happened that very year in 1917.
Hold on for a second, Father. We'll hit this break, and we'll come right back. Father Sean Connolly with us. We're talking about the secrets of Fatima. There seems to be still a confusion, Father, about the third secret and what it might be. Some say it's been released, others say it hasn't. What's your take on that one?
This is the source of much controversy and debate within the church, and it's a long process to explain. If anyone's interested in delving into this question, I recommend a newly published book by Kevin Simmons. It's called On the Third Part of the Secret of Fatima. And it's quite a tome. It's 600 pages.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's a great study on all the controversies, the discrepancies, on the slow revealing of this third secret. My take is this. We just have to get a background. I think there was our sister Lucia, when she wrote down the third secret in 1944, she did it. She placed it in a sealed envelope. She did not intend to reveal it. She wrote that it was to be revealed in 1960. She wrote it down only because she was sick at the time, and they were worried that she might die without leaving the secret to us that we would need to navigate the treacherous waters ahead in the future, where society is increasingly growing more secular, turn away from God, communist errors of godlessness spreading throughout the world. So there was kind of this great hysteria of anticipation. In 1960, the secret is going to be revealed. And when you have a date and when you have this anticipation, theories abound on what must lie within the third secret. 1960 came. Pope St. John the 23rd made the prudential judgment not to disclose it. And then that also set off all the more hysteria.
Oh, my God. Everybody thought it was something horrible, for example.
That's right. And, so then you have all sorts of theories on what it might be. So when you have this background of complete anticipation, so many different theories on what the secret might contain, when it is finally revealed, no matter what it is, there's always a sense of a little bit of disappointment. Everyone wanted their theory to be proven correctly or wanted it to be something, greater than it had to be. But that said, the secret is rather horrifying, and it was a vision given to the children in which they saw a city that lay in ruins and a bishop dressed in white, which is the color that the Holy Father, the Pope, Christ's vicar on earth wears, ascending a mountaintop littered with corpses. And when he arrives at the foot of the big cross, which is at the summit of this mountain, he's killed by a group of soldiers who fire bullets and arrows at him. And then two angels, each with like a crystal aspersorium in their hands, they gather up the blood of these martyrs and they sprinkle the souls that are making their way to God. Mysterious.
Very.
And it's a vision. And we were not given an explanation of what it means. Pope St. John Paul II, on the anniversary of Our Lady's first appearance at Fatima, which is now the liturgical feast of Our Lady of Fatima, on May 13th, was shot 4 times in point-blank range by what most believe to be an agent of communism from Bulgaria. His Ali Aka, he was a Turkish figure.
Yeah.
And he really believes his life was spared by the intercession of Our Lady. As he says, one hand fired the bullet, another hand guided it. And he returned to Fatima the very next year and placed the bullet removed from his chest into the crown of Our Lady. And he saw in himself a fulfillment of this vision, this third part of the secret. And he said, we see the effects of communism ravaging faith throughout Europe and the world throughout the 20th century, and now we see its, violent attack at the very center of the church itself. But Our Lady is with us. She promised the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. She spared my life, and if we consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart as she requested, if we fulfill her request to increase our devotion to her Immaculate Heart, especially by the 5 First Saturdays devotions, Russia will be converted and there will be peace in the world. And we see the fall of the Berlin Wall at the end of the 1980s, perhaps the first glimpse of the ultimate triumph of Our Lady over communism. Because the more you delve into the secrets, the more you delve into Sister Lucia's later writings, Fatima is really communist-focused. It's a message from heaven warning us of the dangers of how communism and godlessness and secularism would spread throughout the 20th century. We still have a long way to go in restoring faith. We need to increase devotion to our Immaculate Heart. That's the job of every Catholic right now.
They have talked about that third secret as being something about Russia converting back into Christianity. I would have thought that the third secret would have been something big, and apparently it is not. In terms of excitement or importance. I don't want to belittle it by any means, but I thought it was going to be something earth-shattering.
Our Lady warned of the annihilation of nations. Our Lady also warned in her Secret of Fatima, because remember, it's all one secret, of coming world wars. In this vision, she shows a city in ruins, a mountaintop of corpses, a bishop dressed in white being killed atop that mountain. That's significant. That's something. I think where most people speculate, if there's a sort of a conspiratorial speculation, it's that, the church has faced, real difficult times since the reforms of the Second Vatican Council. And there's sort of been a crisis of the faith, a crisis of identity within the church. And I think the world's moral standing in the church is trying to regain her footing from a turbulent period following the 1960s and 1970s. And I think the speculation is Our Lady must have given some sort of warning as to a crisis of faith within the church. And I think that's what a lot of people were expecting or maybe hoping for guidance in. And there is, speaking, Our Lady has spoke on that in other Marian apparitions that have been approved, like in Akita in Japan, which occurred in the late 1970s. But when it comes to Fatima, it seems to be a focus on the secularization of society and on the threat of communism. When Sister Lucia, we do have new documentation. A biography of her was just released in 2015 by the sisters of her convent in Coimbra. And she writes about the Second Vatican Council, and the only thing she has to say of it is she calls it a holy council that encourages the praying of the rosary, and too bad few Catholics are faithful to that call. She also, Sister Lucia also writes about 1960, and that we have a glimpse of what it is that she meant when she wanted the secret to be revealed in 1960. And whenever she writes about 1960, it's not an inner church focus, it's about the world reaching its apex of communism in that year. So it seems to be a focus on the threat of communism to the souls of Christians in Western society.
Now let's talk about the miracle of the sun. 70,000 witnesses, people saw something. Do we actually think the sun came down? What happened, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the Lord's very generous to us in our skeptical age. I think to show the veracity of this message, which is so important for our times, in which man has forgotten God, He gave us abundant evidence in the truths of Our Lady's message at Fatima. They come from the prophecies, the fulfillment of the prophecies, in the world wars coming and the spread of communism, which, the revolution only happened the year the children saw Our Lady, so they knew nothing of Russia. They thought Russia was the name of a bad woman. They had no concept of Russia spreading errors in the world. So that shows the veracity of the children's accounts. So we have the fulfillment of the prophecies to show us the truth behind Fatima. We have the upstanding character of these children, but also we have the great miracle of the sun that was testified to by 70,000 persons.
And a photograph in their local newspaper.
Yes, and that local newspaper, that very day, published articles mocking all those who journeyed out to Fatima to see this hoax. There are two prominent newspapers of Portugal at the time. The names were O Século and Diário de Noticias. These were pro-government, anti-clerical newspapers. They had a wide circulation that included the capital of Lisbon. And they wrote articles that recorded eyewitness accounts of their editors and reporters who had been at Fatima and who had witnessed this miracle of the sun. The reporters of these newspapers were dispatched to the Cova de Iria in Fatima. They were expecting to detail for their readership crowds being dispersed by soldiers of the anti-clerical government. or even better, the crowds themselves repudiating the three little children because the promised miracle failed to transpire. But this is what they wrote instead. Particularly compelling is the words of one of the editors of O Século. His name was Avelino de Almeida. And on the morning of October 13th itself, when the actual miracle took place, he wrote an article decrying what was taking place at Fatima. He said it was sort of like an embarrassment to the nation, how easily our country folk can be deceived by clergy looking to promote some spectacle for financial benefit. But in the very next day, on October 14th, the day after the miracle took place, he wrote these words. I'm going to quote it for you. I have it here in front of me. He said, "One could see the immense multitude turn toward the sun, which appeared free from the clouds and in its zenith. It looked like a plaque of dull silver, and it was possible to look at it without the least discomfort. It might have been an eclipse which was taking place. People then began to ask each other what they had seen. The great majority admitted to having seen the trembling and the dancing of the sun." And this same skeptic later wrote that the rationalism of unbelievers, his own so-called rationalism, has been dealt a, quote, formidable blow. So these are compelling witnesses. You know, it's reported in secular newspapers. It's witnessed by over 70,000 people. It can't be dismissed as mass hallucination because people reported seeing the sun dance in the sky.
I mean, something happened.
25 to 40 miles away.
Why not consider the possibility of some kind of extraterrestrial craft that they saw in front of the sun that looked like it could be the sun coming down?
I'll tell you why. First, another testimony to it is the children foretold this miracle. You have a 10, a 9, and a 7-year-old saying, on October 13th, a great miracle will happen. So that's pretty amazing, too.
All right.
That it was foretold.
And obviously they were told about it.
Yeah. So the people had an expectation, and they saw it, right? So there were not just believers there, but there were plenty of skeptics. Why I would dismiss the notion of this being some sort of extraterrestrial appearances, and to speak to L.A. Marzulli, who is a Christian himself,
yes, he is.
A faithful Christian,
yes.
Is, our Lord says in the Gospels, by your fruits you shall know them. So we're to judge occurrences, we're to judge events, movements by their fruits. And if they bear good fruit, that's a sign of their truthfulness. So if this is a harbinger of deception, if this is an alien, then it failed miserably. We can be grateful to it because it brought about a great good. But that's not how the demons work. This occurrence brought about an increase of faithfulness to Jesus Christ, an increase in prayer amongst countless peoples. It brought about a return to God.
Did this get worldwide?
Fruit to our day.
Father, did it get worldwide coverage? I mean, did it have the kind of media we have today? But did it get coverage around the planet?
It's interesting to detail like how news of Fatima spread. So it immediately spread throughout the nation of Portugal. I mean, again, these two secular newspapers had circulation in the capital of Lisbon. The Fatima event, the great testimony to the miracle of the sun, remained, very popular, very well known in Portugal. It was approved by the local church in 1930, so 12, 13 years later, after a thorough investigation. And then really it spread, I think when it caught the attention of the whole Catholic world, this is before the age of internet, easy access to like international telephone lines, so word doesn't spread like it does today, of course. But when it really captured the Catholic world's attention was in the 1940s with the publication of Sister Lucia's memoirs and the revelation of the first two parts of the Secret of Fatima. So that's really how news spread throughout the world, although it was growing and growing since the first, since the date of the miracle of the sun at the end of 1917. But it took off in the early 40s.
Well, I'm convinced something happened. No question about it. And I can easily believe it was an apparition of the Virgin Mary. The sun thing, that still has me puzzled. How about you?
Yeah, 70,000 people report the sun.
They saw something
dancing in the sky.
Was it a optical illusion?
A silver disc, but they said the sun looks like a silver disc. They speak of the sun twirling about and emitting all sorts of colors that even reflected upon the earth itself. How it was raining all night, torrential downpours from midnight until noon when Our Lady would appear at the cove.
Hold on for a second, Father. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, talk more, and we'll take phone calls with you next.